Fortune cookie. The fortune cookie is one of the most recognizable cookies in the world, yet its origins have nothing to do with China. The most credible historical evidence points to Japanese immigrants in California in the early 20th century, where a similar sesame and miso wafer called Sujura senbei had been made for centuries. The American version replaced the religious inscription inside with printed paper fortunes and became embedded in Chinese-American restaurant culture so thoroughly that most people assume the connection is ancient. The cookie itself is simple and lightly sweet, more of a vessel than a flavor experience. The fortune inside is the point, and that inversion, packaging, meaning inside something edible, made it unlike anything else in baking. Macaron. The French macaron is two almond meringue shells sandwiched around a filling of ganache, buttercream, or jam. The shells are made from almond flour, egg whites, and sugar, folded together using a technique that requires precise timing. Overmix and they spread flat, undermix and they crack. A properly made macaron has a smooth dome top, a ruffled edge called the foot, and a slight chew that gives way to the filling. Despite being considered the pinnacle of French patisserie, the cookie likely traveled to France from Italy with Catherine de' Medici's court in the 16th century. Paris made it famous, particularly through the historic rivalry between the patisseries La Durée and Pierre Hermé, but the macaron's roots are considerably older than its reputation suggests. Molasses cookie. Molasses cookies are dense, dark, and built around the deep bitterness of molasses balanced against warm spices. Molasses itself is the byproduct of refining sugar cane into white sugar, the liquid that remains after the crystals are extracted. It carries more complexity and less sweetness than refined sugar, with a slightly smoky, almost mineral quality. Combined with ginger, cinnamon, and clove, it produces a cookie that is rich without being sweet in an obvious way. The dough is typically rolled into balls and coated in sugar before baking, which creates a crackled surface as the cookie spreads. The texture at its best is soft and chewy in the center, with edges that firm up just enough to hold everything together. Gingerbread. Gingerbread has a longer history than almost any other cookie, with spiced honey cakes documented in medieval Europe as far back as the 11th century. The version most people recognize today, cut into shapes, baked firm, and decorated, became widespread in Germany, where gingerbread guilds controlled its production for centuries, and elaborate decorated loaves were exchanged as gifts and tokens of affection. The dough uses molasses or honey, flour, and a blend of warm spices anchored by ginger, and it bakes hard enough to hold detailed shapes and support icing. Gingerbread houses became a cultural tradition following the popularity of the Brothers Grimm story Hansel and Gretel in the 19th century, and the association with winter celebrations has held ever since. Linzer cookie. The Linzer cookie is a direct descendant of the Linzer torte, an Austrian pastry considered one of the oldest recorded cake recipes in the world, with documents tracing it to the city of Linz in the 17th century. The cookie version takes the same elements, a buttery, nut-based dough spiced with cinnamon and clove, and scales them down into sandwich cookies with a cutout window on the top shell that reveals the jam filling beneath. Raspberry is traditional, and the contrast between the pale dough and the bright red jam is part of the cookie's visual identity. The almond or hazelnut flour in the dough gives it a crumbly, almost shortbread-like texture that is distinct from most other sandwich cookies. Black and white cookie. The black and white cookie is a New York institution with roots in the wave of German Jewish immigration to the city in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It is technically closer to a small cake than a cookie. The base is a soft cakey round made from a batter similar to pound cake, and the flat side is iced with two distinct halves of vanilla and chocolate fondant. The contrast is the entire point, both visually and in flavor. It became embedded in New York deli culture and has remained a fixture there for over a century. Jerry Seinfeld once dedicated an entire monologue to it, describing it as a model of peaceful coexistence, an observation that captured exactly why the cookie has always meant something slightly beyond the sum of its parts.